First, the headlines. The Sultanate of Oman calls for holding an emergency international conference on Palestine that includes all conflicting parties with the aim of ending the conflict in the region to achieve regional and international peace. The Sultanate of Oman demands before the International Court of Justice to put an end to the Israeli practices in the occupied Palestinian territories and the continuous violation against the right of the people of Palestine for self-determination. And the Israeli aggression on Rafah continues to claim victims, and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees warns of the agency's imminent collapse. Those were the headlines. Now for the news in detail. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq sent a cable of greetings to His Excellency Allah Karis, President of the Republic of Estonia, on the occasion of his country's National Day. The Sultanate of Oman called for holding an emergency international conference on Palestine that includes all conflicting parties with the aim of reaching an agreement for a permanent ceasefire and ending the conflict in the region in order to achieve regional and international peace. His Excellency Sayyid Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi, Foreign Minister, said that the initiative called for by the Sultanate of Oman is similar to the initiative of U.S. President George H.W. Bush when he called for the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991. In an interview with the British newspaper The Economist, His Excellency indicated that the Sultanate of Oman, like all of its neighbors, is suffering of the consequences of the worsening crisis in the Gaza Strip, stressing that the possibility of further escalation threatens the entire region, so the ceasefire represents a humanitarian and strategic necessity, and the step of adopting a ceasefire resolution and holding an emergency conference must be done quickly and decisively. His Excellency the Minister stressed that the Foreign Ministry said the absence of a Palestinian state means that the entire region is doomed to a continuous cycle of violence, and the Palestinians will continue to live under the threat of extinction. He explained that Hamas movement cannot be eliminated because its national liberation movements like Hamas are deeply rooted in their societies, and their cause will remain alive no matter what. Many fighters are dead, so peacemakers must find a way to talk to them and listen to them. Today, the Sultanate of Oman presented its oral argument before the International Court of Justice, which holds sessions upon the request of the United Nations General Assembly since 2022 to issue an advisory opinion regarding Israeli practices against the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. In his presentation, the Sultanate of Oman, represented by His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Sheikh Abdullah bin Salim Al Harthi, Oman's ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, affirmed that the violation of the right to self-determination, occupation, settlement, and annexation of the Palestinian territories by Israel since 1967 impedes the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and aims to perpetuate the occupation. It pointed out that Israel's policies affect the legal status of the occupation and the legal consequences thereof on all the states and the United Nations. The court should impose an immediate and unconditional end to this illegal situation.
The conduct and practices of an occupying power are well documented and strictly regulated in international law. The Fourth Geneva Convention is clear that An occupying power may not transfer its civilian population to occupied territories. In addition, international law does not provide for permanent occupation or occupation legitimized through the establishment of demographic change through settlement. The 75-year duration of Israeli presence in the occupied Palestinian territories and the persistence policy of settlement renders the Israeli occupation illegal and in breach of the United Nations Charter.
On his part, His Excellency Khalid bin Hilal al-Mawali, the chairman of the Shura Council, said in his speech before the Aegean Parliamentary Assembly held in the Azerbaijani capital Baku that when talking about the importance of the sustainable development and the cooperation in the Aegean community, the Aegean society should not forget what our brothers in Gaza and Palestine are suffering from: comprehensive destruction of the infrastructure, deliberate destruction of all forms of life, and the loss of the most basic civil rights and requirements for a decent life. His Excellency, the Shura Council Chairman, stressed that in Palestine and Gaza Strip, there is a horrific genocide war that leaves none standing, in addition to the complete collapse of any life requirement, the spread of diseases, and the complete paralysis of education and development. He also pointed out that there is a part in Asia, a country under occupation that cannot meet the requirements for sustainable development, and an occupier that doesn't respect any human rights and gives no regard to the international law. Dozens of people in the Gaza Strip attended a mass funeral in the southern city of Rafah today for 10 people, including children, who were killed in Israeli airstrikes. Special Muslim prayers were held before the bodies were taken to a nearby cemetery for burial. One after another, the bodies, draped in white and black cloth, were laid to rest inside the grave. Israeli officials have been saying that they will launch a ground of offensive on Rafah along the border of Egypt. Over the past weeks, airstrikes have killed dozens in the city. More than half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million is crowded into Rafah after fleeing fighting elsewhere in the territory. The Israeli offensive has left over 29,000 Palestinians dead, caused widespread destruction, displaced an estimated 80% of Gaza's population, and fueled a humanitarian disaster. The Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees UNRWA, Filippi Lazzarini, has warned of the agency's imminent collapse, indicating that famine in Gaza is now imminent. Lazzarini stated in a letter addressed to the President of the United Nations General Assembly that the agency's ability to fulfill its mandate is now severely threatened amid a repeated Israeli calls for dismantling of UNRWA. This comes at a time when humanitarian needs in Gaza are escalating unprecedentedly. The agency has terminated contracts of accused employees and initiated an international investigation to assess UNRWA's neutrality, despite Israel's failure to provide any evidence so far to sustain its claims, which led to the suspension of funding from 16 countries totaling $450 million. The Ukrainian army reported that a Russian drone bombed a commercial area in the city of Odessa on the Black Sea, killing 3 people, adding that its air defenses were able to confront 23 of 31 drones launched by the Russian army, as one of them was able to bomb an area close to the port. In the city of Dnipro, 8 people were injured after a Russian drone targeted a 9-story building and destroyed several apartments. Several people were injured after more than 100 cars collided with each other following the freezing of a section of a highway in the Chinese city of Chuzhou. Earlier, large parts of China experienced cold weather, waves, snowstorms, and sleet, affecting transportation during the usual time when millions of people return to their hometowns to celebrate the Lunar New Year holidays. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's news bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Sultanate of Oman calls for holding an emergency international conference on Palestine that includes all conflicting parties with the aim of ending the conflict in the region to achieve regional and international peace. The Sultanate of Oman demands before the International Court of Justice to put an end to the Israeli practices in the occupied Palestinian territories and the continuous violation against the right of the people of Palestine for self-determination. And the Israeli aggression on Rafah continues to claim victims, and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees warns of the agency's imminent collapse. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, thank you for watching and have a good night.